In the wild plains of Africa, where survival is written in the law of tooth and claw, a lioness named Amani did the unthinkable. She shielded a trembling ostrich chick, the very prey she should have devoured. That single act stopped a hardened ranger in his tracks, for in the lioness's eyes he saw the reflection of his own buried grief, the pain of a father who had once lost a child. The wind swept across the Tsavo plain, bending the tall grass into pale waves. A lioness named Amani moved through them like a ghost of gold and dust, silent, lean, her ribs faint beneath the coat that had known too many dry seasons. Hunger had become routine, but not cruelty. She hunted because the body remembered, even when the heart had forgotten why. That morning, her ears caught a strange cry, a trembling chirp that didn't belong to any predator. She followed it through the grass and found a tiny ostrich chick standing alone, its legs shaking, its feathers still soft as down. It looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes. For a long breath, nothing moved. The lioness could have ended it in one clean motion, but something inside her stopped. The chick's cry pierced through a memory buried deep beneath instinct. A faint mewl, the weight of a cub that no longer breathed. Her body tensed, her jaw clenched not to strike, but to keep from trembling. Amani stepped forward, not as a hunter, but as if pulled by some forgotten duty. She lowered her body beside the chick, blocking the sharp wind that swept over the open plain. The little one pressed close, shivering against her side. From the ridge above, Ranger Kato adjusted his binoculars. He scribbled in his notebook. Unusual behavior, predator exhibiting protective stance. He didn't understand what he was seeing, and he didn't need to. His job was to observe, record, report. Yet, for reasons he couldn't name, he lingered a moment longer before turning off his radio. Down below, the sun dipped low, painting the world in copper light. Amani raised her head, ears twitching. The wind carried new sounds, the deep mocking laughter of hyenas gathering somewhere in the thorn scrub. Their laughter grew nearer, rising and falling like a cruel chant in the fading light. The lioness stood tall again, her muscles drawing tight beneath her fur. Behind her, the ostrich chick froze. The air was suddenly alive with danger, and for the first time in a long while, Amani's heartbeat had meaning. She wasn't hunting tonight. She was staying. Morning came quietly, painted in the thin gold of dawn. The air still carried the chill from the night before, and the ground was streaked with the marks of struggle. Paw prints, small scratches, and one long drag where the ostrich chick had stumbled. Amani moved slowly through the grass, her flank brushing against the trembling little bird that trailed close behind. Their paths were side by side now, two sets of tracks pressed into the red dust. High above, on the ridge, Ranger Kato followed their trail. He crouched beside a line of footprints, noting how close they stayed together. The sight made him pause. It was not the pattern of predator and prey, but of something else, something he could not explain in his report. Still, his training took over. He found a steel snare half buried in the sand, the kind used by poachers to trap smaller animals. Protocol was clear. Mark it, report it, and leave it untouched until the evidence team arrived. His knife hovered over the wire. For a long second, he considered cutting it anyway. Below, Amani caught the metallic scent in the air. Her ears flattened. The memory of loss flickered again, the cub she could not save, the soft cry that faded in her mouth. She pushed the chick aside gently, then stood between it and the scent. The wind changed direction, and she could almost feel the threat, invisible but near. Her breath deepened, her body alert. From the scrub beyond, faint laughter echoed, the hyenas again, restless and hungry. They had not given up. Amani turned her head toward the horizon, where the sky was beginning to burn with heat. The chick huddled close to her leg, chirping weakly, trusting what it did not understand. Up on the ridge, Kato finally sheathed his knife. He followed the rule, but his eyes stayed on the distant pair moving through the grass, one predator, one child of prey. He wrote only 3 words in his notebook: "Observation continues south." Then he closed it, unaware that the wind was already carrying the smell of danger straight toward them both. Night returned to Tsavo like a slow, closing hand. The grass whispered with unseen movement, and the air thickened with the scent of fear. Amani guided the ostrich chick to a hollow beside a termite mound, lowering herself so her body formed a wall around it. The sun's warmth was gone. The cold crept in with the dark. Somewhere out there, a chorus began, the thin, cruel laughter of hyenas. The sound rolled across the plain, closer this time, echoing between the thorn trees. Amani's ears twitched toward it, her body tense but steady. The chick pressed itself tighter to her side, its heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. Above them, stars blinked into the sky, sharp and distant, their light too far to offer comfort. On the ridge, Ranger Kato watched through his binoculars. He saw shapes moving in the dark, low shadowy figures circling the clearing. He switched off his radio, knowing the noise might carry. His orders were to stay back, to observe, but instinct told him something was about to break. The hyenas came first as whispers, then as eyes, dozens of small fires glowing between the blades of grass. Sheeta, the leader, padded forward, her shoulders rolling with cruel confidence. She let out a throaty chuckle that sent the others surging closer. Amani rose slowly, head low, tail stiff, her silhouette a single line of defiance against the silver grass. She was outnumbered, but she didn't back down. The first charge came from a young hyena testing her strength. Amani pivoted sharply, a flash of muscle and dust, and struck. The hyena yelped and tumbled back, the laughter breaking into brief chaos. For a moment, the night went still again, but fear is contagious, and so is hunger. The pack began to circle tighter. Kato lifted his rifle, sighting through the scope. He could fire a warning shot, scatter them, but it would also reveal his position. Below, the lioness shifted her stance, her breath steady, waiting. Then a sudden cry split the dark. The ostrich chick, startled by a swooping vulture, bolted from the mound, straight into the open field. Amani's eyes widened. Her heart lurched once before her legs did. She leapt forward into the dark after the small blur of feathers, unaware that the chick's tiny foot had just caught the glint of steel hidden in the dust. The cry came sharp and small, swallowed almost instantly by the night. Amani lunged through the grass, following the sound until she saw it. The chick thrashing, leg caught in a loop of steel buried in the dust. The wire bit deeper with every frantic kick. The scent of blood hit the air, thin and metallic. Amani froze only for a second. The hyenas were closing in again, their laughter climbing like fever. She moved to shield the chick, her body curving around it, every muscle tight as bowstring. She lowered her head and clamped her jaws on the wire, pulling with raw strength. The taste of iron filled her mouth. Sparks flicked where teeth scraped metal. The wire didn't break, but it bent. From the ridge, Kato saw the flicker of movement, the faint shine of steel. His gut turned cold. He knew that shape. It was one of the poacher's snares he had been ordered to leave untouched. He grabbed his radio. Static answered, then a voice. "Do not engage. Evidence site confirmed. Wait for backup." He looked again. The lioness wasn't attacking. She was protecting. The ostrich chick's cries grew weaker. The hyenas began to fan out, circling for an opening. One wrong sound, one hesitation, and both animals would be torn apart. Kato's breath came rough. He snapped the radio off and started down the slope. The dust kicked up around his boots as he ran, rifle slung behind his shoulder. When he reached the trap, Amani lifted her head and met his eyes. It lasted barely a heartbeat, enough for him to understand that this was not a mistake of nature, but a choice. Without a word, he drove his knife into the wire, twisting, forcing it open. The metal groaned, then gave way. The chick stumbled free, collapsing against the lioness's leg. Amani turned back toward the darkness beyond, ears pinned. From somewhere deep in the scrub came a different sound, not the giggle of hyenas this time, but a single, low roar, deep and male. Kato froze. Another lion. The balance of danger had shifted again. The night had not yet lifted, but the air had changed. The laughter of the hyenas faded into uneasy silence, replaced by a heavier rhythm, the measured tread of something larger. From the haze beyond the thorn trees, a lion's shadow emerged. Tsavo, a wandering male with ribs like ridges and a mane streaked by dust, moved with the slow certainty of hunger. Amani stiffened, stepping between him and the trembling chick. Her breath came in short bursts, the wound on her mouth still wet from the wire she'd bitten. Tsavo's golden eyes fixed on her, then dropped to the small bundle at her feet. He rumbled a low sound, half warning, half claim. Kato crouched behind a rock outcrop, watching through the scope of his rifle. He knew this lion by record. Tsavo, a nomad displaced by younger males, often seen scavenging near human settlements. Dangerous, unpredictable. If he fired a warning shot, the noise would start a stampede. Hyenas, lions, everything fleeing at once. He steadied his hands, thinking, waiting. Amani held her ground. The wind pressed her mane flat, carrying Tsavo's scent. There was no fight in him yet, only the ache of starvation. She gave a low growl, the kind mothers use when danger is too near their young. Tsavo stopped. For a brief moment his gaze softened. Not toward her, but toward the faint sound behind her, the chick's weak, rhythmic breathing. Then Amani made the sound that changed everything. It was deep, raw, almost broken. A mother's call, rising from the oldest part of her soul. It wasn't meant for him or even for the chick. It was for something she'd lost long ago. The sound made Tsavo hesitate. He lowered his head, confused, then turned away, melting back into the grass. From his hiding place, Kato exhaled the breath he'd been holding. He lowered his rifle slowly, the barrel trembling. The plain was quiet again, except for the faint whimper of the chick and the distant sigh of the wind. Amani looked toward the horizon. The sky was turning gray, the promise of dawn. The danger had passed, but she didn't rest. She stood guard, eyes never leaving the dark where Tsavo had vanished. Hunger was not gone. It had only learned to wait. The night thinned into a pale gray hush. The danger had slipped back into the brush, but its shadow lingered in the air. Amani lay beside the ostrich chick, her chest rising and falling slowly, each breath leaving small puffs of steam in the cool morning. The scent of blood had faded, washed away by dew and dust. She bent her head to lick the chick's wounded leg, her tongue moving with surprising gentleness for a creature built to kill. The sky began to bloom with the first faint light. Across the open plain, the sounds of Tsavo returned, the distant trill of birds waking, the soft rumble of elephants moving toward the water. Among them was Nasira, an old matriarch with one broken tusk, leading her herd along the ridge. When she passed near the lioness, she paused for a long moment. Her great head turned slightly, eyes calm, and she moved on without alarm. It was a silent acknowledgement, an unspoken treaty between mothers. From his position farther back, Ranger Kato watched through his binoculars. He had not slept. The night had pressed on him heavier than any he remembered. Now, in the thin light of dawn, the scene below felt unreal. Predator and prey resting together in the open, their bodies outlined in silver. He lowered the binoculars and took out his field notebook. On the line marked "Intervention," he hesitated, then wrote 2 words: "Observed coexistence." Amani lifted her head as a warm gust rippled through the grass. The chick stirred, chirping softly, its small eyes following a group of ostriches far in the distance. The lioness stood, stretching her tired limbs, and for the first time in many nights, she did not feel the weight of hunger. Instead, there was a stillness, a quiet space inside her where something had begun to heal. Kato closed his notebook and leaned against the truck, watching as the sun broke the horizon. The light spilled over the plain, painting everything gold. For one breathless moment, all of Tsavo seemed to hold its peace. The silence was not emptiness now, it was mercy. By late afternoon, the sun burned low and red across the savanna. Heat shimmered above the plains, turning the air into liquid light. Amani moved slowly now, each step careful, her shadow stretching long beside the tiny ostrich that trailed behind her. The chick limped but kept close, guided by her pace. In the distance, she could see tall reeds marking the edge of a shallow watering ground. Beyond them, dark shapes moved, ostriches, full-grown, heads bobbing in the heat haze. The sight stirred something in her chest. She paused, watching. The chick gave a faint chirp, almost like a question. Amani lowered her head and nudged it forward, her eyes never leaving the reeds. For the first time, the path ahead did not mean danger. It meant goodbye. On the ridge above, Kato followed at a distance, binoculars resting against his chest. He could see what was about to happen, though he doubted anyone else would ever believe it. In his pocket, he carried the broken snare from the night before, coiled and harmless now. The wire had left a small scar on his hand, but he found himself touching it, almost protectively. Amani led the chick to the edge of the clearing. The larger ostriches noticed them, heads rising high, feathers ruffling with alarm. The lioness stopped and waited, her tail flicking once through the grass. She did not crouch to hide. She only stepped back, letting the small one move ahead on its own. The chick hesitated, then took a few wobbling steps into the open. From the flock came a sharp guttural call, a warning, then a pause. One of the older females broke from the group, her feathers spread wide. She approached cautiously, then leaned down and let out a softer sound. The chick chirped in reply. Amani exhaled, the breath deep and quiet. She turned slightly toward the wind, ears catching every sound. Behind her, Kato lifted his field camera, not to record, but to remember. The lioness began to retreat, step by step, into the shade of the reeds. Yet something in the grass shifted. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement, low, fast, deliberate. It was the flick of a spotted ear. Sheeta had returned. The grass rippled once, and Sheeta broke from the shadows, her laughter sharp and mean. The hyena darted low through the reeds, jaws wide, aiming straight for the small chick that had barely begun to rejoin its kind. The ostriches scattered in panic, wings flapping, sand rising in golden clouds. Amani reacted before thought. Her body moved on instinct older than fear. She spun, claws tearing into the dry earth, and met Sheeta head-on. The collision sent dust flying, the air filled with snarls and the hiss of grass tearing beneath their weight. Sheeta snapped and lunged again, teeth grazing Amani's shoulder, but the lioness pressed forward, driving the hyena back, step by step. The fight was brief, raw, and silent, except for their heavy breaths. Then, with one deep growl that shook the reeds, Amani forced Sheeta to break and retreat into the dark. The plain went still. Only the rustle of the reeds remained. Amani stood panting, her flank rising and falling, blood beading along her fur, but eyes steady. She turned her head to where the ostrich chick now hid beneath the legs of its mother. The larger bird had not fled. It stood tall, chest out, facing the lioness with cautious awe. Between them stretched a quiet understanding, the passing of guardianship from one to another. On the ridge, Kato had watched everything. His rifle stayed at his side. He never raised it once. The golden light of evening spilled across his face as he lowered his binoculars. He took the broken wire from his pocket, looked at it for a long moment, and buried it in the soil. Down below, Amani stepped back from the reeds, her movement slow, deliberate. She paused once to glance toward the horizon, where the sun hung low like an ember. The wind brushed through her mane, carrying with it the distant cry of the reunited flock. For the first time in years, she felt no hunger, only calm. The ache that had lived inside her had turned into something else, something vast and still. She lifted her head to the sky, letting the light fall across her scarred face, and walked into the tall grass until she disappeared from sight. Somewhere far behind, Kato whispered to the fading air, "Today, we both let go." Thank you for joining us on this journey. Before you scroll away, tell me this. Do you believe a bond like theirs could really exist? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just remind you that sometimes the wild loves us back, ways we'll never forget.